In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. All right, can you hear me on the back row? That's the issue. All the way back? Yes? Thank you. All right. Good morning. This church is called St. Paul's Church. You probably know that the land here was bought and the church was built by the rector and vestry of Monumental Church on Broad Street, right over there. And in 1841, they decided almost unanimously to get out of where they were and to move their ministry up the hill to the western side of the capital. You know, Richmond always moves west. And they purchased this land. They built this church in 1845, and they named it St. Paul's. I honestly don't know why they called it St. Paul's Church. I know you do, but I don't. And more than that, I'm not sure I've ever heard anybody say a good word about St. Paul's since I've been here. Being an Episcopalian means you love to attack St. Paul. They say he's doctrinaire, that he doesn't like women, and so forth. But I got a new feeling for St. Paul this summer, and I'd like to share it with you. Just 3 months ago, after Easter, Annie and I got to go on a pilgrimage in the steps of St. Paul. We went to Greece, to Thessaloniki, and Athens, and Corinth, to Philippi, and then we got on a ship and we crossed the Aegean, and we visited Ephesus, which is in Turkey. And while we were traveling, I was reading some of Paul's letters and accounts of his trips in the book of Acts, and an incredible biography of him by Edgar Goodspeed. And what I saw and what I found was something totally different from the pig-headed doctrinaire picture of St. Paul, which I'd often heard and even echoed myself. I saw a new Paul, and here's what I saw. I saw a man who had a powerful spiritual experience, which was electric but not confining. A sense of the reality of God and of his presence in Jesus, who had just been executed in Jerusalem. It was a spiritual experience, and Paul carried that spirit with him wherever he went. Most remarkably, Paul became increasingly convinced that the sense he had of God and God's love was true for every human being, regardless of race or gender or culture or religion. God's Spirit was, in that sense, culturally and personally universal. This conviction made Paul incredibly open to different cultures as he traveled around the diverse towns of Asia Minor, a little sub-universe of races and cultures and religions that had been connected by the common sea and in later years by Roman roads. And all of this means that Paul is the last person whom a church or seminary or theologian ought to be trying to make into a consistent doctrinal writer. He changed what he was saying and thinking everywhere he went. He was in dialogue with each group of people. Sometimes he shared his own struggles openly. He spent a lot of time sharing how he was working his own way out of Pharisaic Judaism. But much of the time, he was trying to understand how his sense of the Spirit of God that had been in Jesus related to each town he visited and to the theology or worldview of each group he encountered. And so he learned and said new things. He saw the world in different ways in different places. Christian denominations split. Y'all know that, right? They split regularly over their interpretation of Paul's writings. It's probably the most common cause of it. They make Paul into a doctrinal bigot, and then they split with one another over the bigotry they have constructed. But this summer, to my great and totally unexpected pleasure, I saw something radically different in Paul. I saw a powerful flow of creative hope. And then there's Ephesus. Anybody been to Ephesus? Wow. Bunch of Ephesians here. Ephesus is the most intact archaeological ruin of Paul's time. It's an enormous excavation. At Ephesus, I walked where Paul walked, literally. The road was composed of large stone slabs. The way into Ephesus was the same as it had been for 2 millennia. Paul walked on these same stones. Then we did too. I don't know if you saw the picture of Annie and me in the bulletin this week, but that was us walking on the stones in Ephesus, sort of. Did you put that picture in the bulletin? The what? The picture of Annie and me on the website. Yeah, right. Look at it if you haven't seen it. Yeah, okay. Thanks. Annie, you want to come up here and preach too? Okay. So Paul walked on these same stones that we were walking on. The town was just literally as Luke had described it in the book of Acts. Really. The great temple of Artemis had been destroyed. It was one of the 7 wonders of the world at one point. But the big amphitheater was right there intact where Paul had nearly been lynched by a crowd, as were shops and temples and houses and public baths. It was all true. The stones told the story. Paul spent more than a year in Ephesus. He knew many people there. It was a city of more than 200,000 people when he was there. He wrote today's letter that you've got an epistle reading from to the people he met in Ephesus, with whom he lived for more than a year. It is so simple, and it is the opposite of doctrinaire. So I think Paul is sharing not a doctrinal theology that you have to believe or practice. I think he's sharing his core methodology as a person of faith. And I think this describes what Paul was trying to do around 45 to 55 AD. And I think it gives clarity to our work here today. It's an honor to be with you today, talking in St. Paul's Church with the invitation to follow Paul's guidance. In the letter to the Ephesians, he gave this simple advice: see then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. I asked the clergy of St. Paul's if I could use the translation of this passage from the King James Version of the Bible. Where's Rainey? Okay, thank you so much. They agreed. It's tough being a clergy person, it really is. This is no less accurate a translation from the Greek text than the modern ones, but it's much more powerful and much more poetic. See then that ye walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. I am sure that was Paul's self-talk. And we could do no better than to make it our self-talk today. Walk circumspectly. What a wonderful Elizabethan word. Say it. Isn't that a great word? It means literally looking all around you as you walk. I think of that phrase as I remember following Paul's steps in Ephesus. Now, people don't walk much anymore, except on a walking machine or walk to get a dog taken care of. But the current concept of a city in America, certainly in the latest edition of Metropolitan Richmond, is a sprawling series of subdivisions and shopping centers located at the interchanges of a superhighway that surrounds the depleted city center, to which individuals travel in cars. I don't know what it means to drive circumspectly. I don't know how it is that we learn or pay attention or get our own information and data in this current time. We're kind of captive to the electronics of the time. Paul went from town to town, walking and talking to people. He had direct access. Our information comes through various media. We turn it on and off. I would guess that walking circumspectly means trying to see fact and truth through the media we consume. It means taking care that the things that you read and listen to have that same goal that Paul describes, trying to see accurately. It means turning off Fox News and MSNBC. It means supporting Virginia Public Media as they build a new Center for News and Information 10 blocks down on Broad Street. Walking circumspectly is increasingly difficult. If we can't get the information on our own, we must seek out people who value truth. But most of all, walking circumspectly means being committed to an open mind and heart. See then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise. Do we really need to say this? Do we have to keep the same blindness, the same prejudices that we've had for decades? Look, I know I'm a lot younger than many of you. I thought I'd take that out of the sermon, but it was fun, so I could. But even I find that I just want to hold on to my old opinions and keep from doing the work of learning from what is being known and discovered. What is it they say? Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. I think wisdom is taking advantage of your experience by knowing what is most important in your limited time and pursuing it with all your heart. It doesn't do much good to walk circumspectly if you don't appropriate what you're learning. See then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. Here, I believe, is the core of Paul's practice. This is about redeeming, but not redemption in a narrow theological sense. It's about doing your best to bring goodness and love and justice into the world in the time, the valuable time that you have available to you. Correcting the time. Why? because things aren't right. The days are evil. They haven't been right for a long time. There are big things that need to be fixed, big oppressions that need to be lifted, big inequities that must be undone. Our ancestors have gone after big things, and we must do the same. That makes time valuable. Not just the passage of time, but redeemed time. If you want a definition of reparations, it's here. This is reparation. This is our commitment to it. It means repairing the broken world, repairing the broken city, repairing the broken nation, repairing broken relationships, repairing broken people, repairing whatever you can, because without that, the days will continue simply to perpetuate evil. Why is redeeming connected with circumspection and wisdom? Because much of the evil that surrounds us is by habit invisible to us. That's how we cope with it. You know, this church and the city existed for 141 years after the Civil War without admitting there had been the largest slave market on the East Coast 5 blocks away from here. That's just not seeing at a level that's really hard to understand. Evil is hidden by habit. Cluelessness is our daily dress. We bypass reality and then build our lives on the bypass. We have to see reality before we can repair it. So here's my truth this morning. I almost never preach a sermon on the letters of St. Paul. But I wanted to today, because when I traveled around the towns he visited, and when I walked on the stones where his feet had landed, I was overwhelmed by his openness of spirit, by his commitment to spreading good spirit and decent values throughout different cultures and classes and religions. And I was captured by the beautiful Old English translation of his advice to the Ephesians. And I just want to say it over and over. See then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools but as wise, redeeming the time. Walk circumspectly, St. Paul's, not as fools but as wise. Redeem the time.